Welcome to the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. I'm Adam Lang. As regular listeners would know, on Fridays we like to lighten things up a bit, and one of our favourite topics is the business of wine. Australian winemakers haven't exactly had the best few years. In various parts of the country there's been droughts, bushfires, floods and then COVID. And if that wasn't enough, more recently China, our largest export market for wine, slapped crippling tariffs on Australian wine, forcing winemakers to move quickly to find new markets. One of those companies was Leconfield Wines, which is actually 3 labels owned by Dr. Richard Hamilton from one of Australia's original winemaking families. Richard, welcome to Fear and Greed.
Oh, thank you so much, Adam. It's great to join you today.
There's a lot of history going back to some of the oldest vineyards in South Australia. Please tell me about Leconfield Wines and your family story.
If I can start with the family story, look, my great-great-grandfather, who's my namesake, Richard Hamilton, came out to South Australia in 1837, together with his wife Anne and some 8 children. And he came from Dover. The family came from Dover, and being just across the waters from France, he always had an abiding interest in wine. And although he was a tailor by trade, he spent a long time in France visiting vineyards, and then he actually started to import wine. Mind you, I should mention that the importation of the wines by Richard was a bit undercover, and his activities came to the attention of the authorities, and his wife thought that perhaps they should move to South Australia.
Oh, that's the right kind of spirit to come here.
Yes, so he wasn't a convict by any means, but who knows, he might have been had he stuck around in Dover. But yes, look, he had an interest in wine, and he wanted to grow grapes and make wine. And so within a year or two of settling near Adelaide on the banks of the Sturt River, which you would probably know, he planted South Australia's first vineyard with the intention of producing wine. So that's the background, and the family have been going continuously in vineyards and winemaking for almost 185 years.
That is a remarkable story.
And of course, the Richard Hamilton label that you mentioned is really named after him. I mean, it's just coincidental that it's my name, but I guess that's important too. Now, a 4th generation descendant of Richard was my uncle Sidney Hamilton, who used to be the chief winemaker in the old Hamilton Ewell winery. And just as a matter of interest, he was the one who actually pioneered the use of refrigeration and cold fermentation for making delicate and high quality white table wines. He retired from the family business in 1955, but he always had this yearning to make Australia's classic red wine from Cabernet Sauvignon. That was his penchant. In 1974, when he was aged 76, he'd been searching the country high and low. He went to New South Wales, to the Highlands, he went to Tasmania, he went to Adelaide Hills, and then he went to Coonawarra. And he decided that Coonawarra was the place to make Australia's classic Cabernet Sauvignon. So at the age of 76, he purchased a block of Terra Rossa soil. He was advised by the late Bill Redman, who knew Coonawarra like the back of his hand. So he bought this block of land, he planted a vineyard, and he built a winery, which was a remarkable thing at the age of 76. And he called it Leconfield. And Leconfield is an ancestral name on my great-great-grandfather's side, who was a Lord Leconfield from the Petworth estate in the south of England. So that's where the ancestral name of Leconfield came into being.
That's an incredible story.
It is. I mean, at the age of 76, I don't think there are too many passionate winemakers who are going to start a business from the ground up, literally from the ground up, a wine business.
Terrific. And I guess evolving that now to the more present day, how have the last few years been for you?
Well, look, I'd say that the wine industry always is tough. There are always uncertainties. It doesn't matter what aspect you look at, whether it's pests in the vineyard, whether it's floods, whether it's drought. And then, of course, there are economic threats that loom over the horizon from time to time. So, look, for us, the last 3 years have been tougher than normal. We've had two very dry years in 2019 and 2020. And then, of course, later in 2020, we were hit by the rapid increase in taxes by the Chinese government on wine to be exported to China. So the headwinds have been stronger than they've ever been, I would say, Adam.
So on those China tariffs, how much wine were you exporting to China before the tariffs were introduced?
Well, look, I would say that approximately 10% of our produce went to China. Look, we usually say that our export is 25% of our sales. So the China market was a fairly big proportion of our export. But look, we've never put eggs into one basket, and we've always realised that whilst China was great when it was there, it may not last forever. So we've endeavoured to diversify over many years, really.
And have you moved entirely away from the Chinese market now?
Well, we've really been forced to, because the importers that we deal with, and they're very good people, and they've got wonderful customers who love our wines. I mean, they just literally can't justify those 200% tariffs. So it's really shut down. But look, we're keeping the lines of communication open in the hope that sometime down the track it may open up. But I think that's going to be some years off, actually, Adam.
Well, we can keep hope alive. We'll be back with more in a moment. I'm talking to the owner of South Australia's Leconfield Wines, Dr. Richard Hamilton. In terms of the other international markets, what have you found has been your trading in recent years?
Well, look, it's always been good in a number of areas. So, for instance, Belgium, we've been in Belgium for probably 15 years, and we've been able to further develop that. Just interestingly, just after the 21 vintage, our Belgian distributors came across, which they do from time to time, and they were very keen to take on bigger orders and make bigger commitments. So that's really been a help. And Canada has opened up for us, as has Finland. And we're looking at other areas. Interestingly, we're still exporting to Hong Kong, which is surprising. And we've had a long-standing arrangement with Japan for just over 20 years, really, and that continues. So it's really a matter of developing those markets further and opening new markets up, like Canada. So we've opened up new markets in Canada, and that's in provinces where we haven't been before. So that's a good thing.
Often it can be about finding a champion in different markets to help you develop your export line and then develop the market in those countries. How do you go about sourcing these relationships?
Well, look, sometimes it's just by pure chance. Sometimes you get a phone call or an email from somebody who says, look, I've heard about your wines. I'd like to come and visit you and have a look at you. And so, look, that was really how the Belgian market began, because that family, they are in the business of importing potatoes and onions to Belgium and placing them in some of the big supermarkets there. But Jacques, he's always been interested in wine, and he decided to diversify. So it was just a chance thing. And of course, look, the Australian Trade Commission has helped put us in contact with different people, for instance, in Finland. And look, we also export to Denmark. This is an interesting story because my wife is Danish. So this came through her Danish connections and a family connection. And I guess we've been exporting to Denmark, well, since the early 1980s. So it's actually our longest standing market, and it's been with the same distributor all along.
You're also available in some pretty prestigious domestic settings as well, like on the GAN. How did that come about?
Well, look, it's a combination of things. It's relationships. We were helped by our South Australian distributor, Options. They had some contacts there. So it was a matter of developing the relationships with the buyers of the GAN. But look, in the end, it came down to our presentation, the package, and competitive tasting. They latched on to our Leconfield Coonawarra Merlot, and it's been a great product for us to have on the GAN.
It's also a great family story to go with the wine, and that can't hurt.
Absolutely.
So winemaking overall is a formidable business, but it also seems to need passion to survive and grow. Do you still have that passion?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Look, I've been passionate about it since I was a kid in shorts and long socks or shorts and no socks. Look, I grew up in a wine family. My father was a member of the old Hamilton Yule Company. And so, look, there was wine on the table every night. And as kids, we got the occasional sip, but there was always a lot of discussion about wine. So, look, I've always been interested. But look, you probably know I've got another profession. I'm a surgeon. I'm a plastic surgeon. When I was nearing the end of my school years, I'd worked a couple of vintages at the old Hamilton Wine Company, and my parents said to me, Richard, look, your father doesn't have a big enough shareholding in Hamilton's, and if you went into the family company, you would be swamped by your cousins. You should look elsewhere. And I'd always been interested in medicine too. It was, I was torn between the two, medicine or wine. So I went into medicine and graduated very well, but I always harboured that desire to make wine, to have my own winery. Now, this was in the very late 60s, and it's an interesting little story because my mother gave me a book written by Max Lake, Dr. Max Lake, Classic Wines of Australia. I don't know whether you've ever read it, but it's a beautifully crafted book. And Max Lake was a Sydney surgeon, and he had a passion for French wines, and he established this vineyard in the Hunter called Lake's Folly.
It's a great vineyard.
Absolutely. And look, I thought after reading this book, well, look, if Max Lake, without being steeped in wine like I was, if he can start a small winery and make it a success, why can't I? Terrific. And so when I graduated and I was ambitious to go into surgery, I had a window of opportunity of about 2 years. And I decided I would build a winery on my father's vineyard and get the winery going before I moved into training in surgery. So look, that passion has been with me for 50 years or so, I suppose. 50 years since I started the winery, but of course it's longer than that since I was a youngster growing up in a family of wine.
Richard, stay with me. We'll be back in a minute. My guest this morning is Dr. Richard Hamilton, owner of Leconfield Wines. So looking ahead from those great origins, where do you see the business in 5 years' time?
Well, look, I think it's very difficult to predict even in 1 year's time, Adam. I mean, if we look what's happened in the last 12 months. But look, we've always believed that we've got to constantly refresh. I mean, the history is a great thing to have, and it gives certainty to our customers and potential customers, but we've got to renew and refresh. We've just brought out a new label range for the single vineyard wines like Ghost Hill Shiraz, 12 Rose Mourvedre, and Hut 11 Cabernet Sauvignon, and Burton's Vineyard Grenache. So we've rebranded those. We've rebranded our signage. Our estate range, that's the Richard Hamilton Estate range, we're now looking to rebrand and refresh so we can appeal to the under 25s, and that's a very interesting process. And look, the other thing we've done, we actually built a new cellar door at Coonawarra, and this happened, well, we completed it just as COVID came.
Right.
And we'd had everything arranged. There was going to be a big opening. Premier Stephen Marshall was going to come down and officiate. But as COVID came in, and we had to abandon that. And there we had this lovely new cellar door, fantastic landscaping and beautiful roses, and it sat idle for months. So look, that That was a little challenging for us, but anyway, things have freed up since COVID, and we've opened the cellar door sales, and it's a lovely, warm space, and it does allow all the social distancing things that are essential in the COVID environment. Whereas the previous cellar door sales was a tiny little area, and whilst it was intimate, we just couldn't have looked after customers in a safe way that we can now. And at McLaren Vale, we're expanding the landscaping there, refreshing the cellar door sales area. We're looking to host weddings. On the winemaking side, one interesting thing that's coming up now is that we're doing some co-fermentation of Cabernets. So we're taking in Cabernet Sauvignon and Cabernet Franc grapes at the same time. They go in the same fermenting vat, putting them together so that they can integrate really right from day zero. There are a lot of things going on. We're looking at alternative varieties like Fiano and Tempranillo in McLaren Vale. So look, our view is that we've got to constantly renew and refresh, but we still have to stick by the things that we know do well, which is Shiraz in McLaren Vale and Grenache in McLaren Vale and Cabernet Sauvignon in Coonawarra. These are our staple grapes and our staple wines, and I think that they will be with us for a very long time to come.
Richard, that is terrific. I have learnt a lot, and you've given me some homework to do. I've got a book by Dr. Max Lake to read and some new wines to try as well. So thank you for a great chat with Fear and Greed.
It's been a wonderful pleasure to talk with you, Adam, and look forward to another opportunity down the track.
I do too. That was Dr. Richard Hamilton, owner of South Australia's Leconfield Wines, for the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. And join Sean Aylmer every weekday morning for the full Fear and Greed podcast, the business news you need for a successful day. I'm Adam Lang. Enjoy your day.